boomers and nerds all at once. I am one of those, skeptical of status quo, lazy and to the bone, no doubt about it.
I hate the way words get overused in our little world. I do. Sometimes I really hate them. It almost feels like lying at this point, because we want to get, especially we're all stuck in our houses right now, we want to get it on the mic and get really excited about players and talk about dominance, right? But like everything else, there's no nuance to that damn word. And there's a big difference between being DeAndre Hopkins level dominant, Calvin Johnson level dominant, and Tee Higgins level dominant. There's a big difference. Was Tee Higgins dominant in college? Yeah, he definitely was. He profiles, let's just get it out of the way. Profiles was a very good wide receiver. I like him a lot. And talk about him more in depth. I'm making a whole video on him. Come on. Love him. We're not talking about that level of dominance at the college level. Welcome in. If you've never been here before, this is, another guy talking about college prospects as if he knows a thing or two. Really don't. I get it. But I have fun. We have fun talking about it. I like hearing different opinions, so if you have any, put them in the comments or send me a DM on Twitter at Pahowdy, all that stuff. It's even more boring than normal because I'm a nerd, so I like to talk about numbers and nerdy type things, or I'm a fake nerd at least. I'm a guy pretending to be a nerd. And I'm going to break down Tee Higgins' statistical profile, what we can expect from him in college based on that profile, and how relevant in fantasy might be. I have decided I've got to create a better way of making comps or comparisons to NFL players. I've created a few numbers recently that I haven't published anything on yet, because frankly they've all come out cracked. I haven't found a great way of doing it yet. But I have got a comp for Tee Higgins. Just a trigger warning here. Trigger warning. You're not going to like it. You're not going to like it at all. I don't think I like it, but the more I think about it, the more I hate like it. Does that make sense? So let's get to it. Tee Higgins, who is he? Well, the first thing you need to know, if I flip over to my traditional nerd screen here, Tee Higgins' profile's lying to us. I recently read a great data-based article about how data scientists, data nerds, luckily I'm not a real data nerd, so I don't have to listen to the advice, shouldn't make data-inspired decisions. It's a really good article, and it's really true. Me, personally, I'm not a real nerd. I know who made these models, so I know where the faults are. That's my value. One, to get you all the raw numbers so you can make your own. Hopefully, let some help in making your own as well. But also, the numbers I'm making, I know where the faults are in them, because I don't think it's a number problem. I think I am not smart enough to create one to work out all the faults. And so instead, I've created numbers that do a good enough job at describing players over a long period of time to compare and project, but some of the faults, what I call tropes, I have got to highlight. Late breakouts don't get highlighted enough, which is a negative or a bad thing. Now, Tee Higgins is definitely not a late breakout player, however, so I don't want to get onto that too strong. But one thing that is a fault in my model right now, on my models, is I only discount seasons where players play 6 games or less. Now, you see here in his first year, Tee Higgins played 7 games. Is that really a fair season to use to profile him compared to DeAndre Hopkins? No. It's not. I've used a low threshold because it has helped out a time or two, and honestly, I'm just too much of a chicken to just remove all seasons where players didn't play 10 games. But I do have to up it a little bit, I think. But it's also too late to start creating new numbers. I know, too late, the season isn't in here yet. I've got the time, but my ranks are out there. I've been using this new model for a while. I don't want to have to retest everything and redo everything right now. I wouldn't be able to catch up by the time of whenever the NFL draft is. But fairly, someone asked if I could look at Tee Higgins from my Patreon page and use his pro day numbers. And while I was at it, I thought, what would happen if I took out that one year that doesn't, it's a little unfair to judge him by. So what I've got in my version of the database right now is that. Now, I didn't take that year out of all of it. I'm still using his average dominator as if that year counts, but his production score, which uses dominator above average, which is an age-adjusted metric, I took that that first year out, and that's what's risen him up here. If you ever go to my database, pin to my timeline in the tweet, it's hosted on Patreon. The Google link is, but it's free. You can go look at it any time. That's kind of what I hope my value is around here in this community. But anyway, once you do that, his production score jumps up right to where you want it to be. The average of the top 24 wide receivers at 0. Above that is good. Below that is, more and more negative. And that's how productive he was compared to top 24 players once multiplied by how predictive the years he played in is. See, you didn't want the explanation, but you were wondering about it, so I said it anyway. Also, his efficiency score, I edited that to discount that 1 year where, again, he didn't play more than 7 games, and once you do that, he comes into line with the top 24 player. This is why I like Tee Higgins. His combine score, which is what my Patreon asked me to look at, if I put his Patreon score in, now I did the same thing Player Profiler does, where you add a little bit because it's pro day time, not a combine time, so that seemed fair to me, and so I used his Player Profiler time instead of the raw pro day time. It comes out as 72. The average for a top 24 wide receiver is 73. So we're in the money, right? His combine score, when weighted against past players, comes out right where you need it to be, and a lot of the things on the profile look like that once you edit it in the pro day times, once you edit in that 1 year that's missing. This is why I like Tee Higgins, and this is also, to be very clear, what a data scientist, those nerds, would not, or rather should not do. You shouldn't layer subjectivity and make exceptions for this player while you're looking at them. But again, I wasn't really expecting Tee Higgins to be good or bad, where I don't watch or know a lot of prospects before they start entering the draft. So I feel a little bit, my conscience is a little bit clear. And also, again, it's because I know where the faults in these numbers are that I can be more or less comfortable saying, I'm not changing the numbers, I'm not adjusting the numbers arbitrary reasons. I know there can be a fault in there, like I'm not discounting a year because he didn't play enough, because I've seen those faults happen before, frankly. I've spent too long looking at this database. Alright, so if we compare him to Clemson wide receivers, and you can pull them up if you just pull them up in Clemson, and you can see what I'm describing. And what I'm going to talk about right now is the distance he created between himself and his teammates. That's essentially what Dominator above average is doing. It's adjusting it by the average of his age as well. It's more important that a player distance themselves at age 18 and 19, because that's when they have the least amount going for them other than their innate talent. Less experience, less physical development. It's much more all about talent. And I think that's the story that John Moore tells us from RotoViz of why College Dominator or age-adjusted metrics matter. And through all my testing, that turns out, that bears true. All right, so if I'm going to compare him to Clemson wide receivers, he looks much less dominant than DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Williams, but much more dominant than someone like Deion Kane, who I actually have a lot of hope for as a 6th-round pick, to be honest. So you can say that, you can tell just from that Tee Higgins' profile is definitely positive overall, and it comes up really positive in my pre-draft model, and as I was just showing you, once you adjust for that 1 year, every other score I've got as well. However, this first down year at age 18, and also his overall profile looks much more like Mike Evans than it does DeAndre Hopkins. And yet, where I tend to separate wide receivers into two different categories initially, into volume wide receivers and efficiency wide receivers. So if we were to look at his efficiency score, yards per team pass attempt above the team's average is my favorite one for right now. I haven't seen it anywhere, so I'm trying to get creative. One of the newer popular statistics, so that's my attempt to do it, and it's what feeds the efficiency score in the model section that we were just looking at. His efficiency looks much more like DeAndre Hopkins than it does Mike Williams, which is weird when his volume looks more like Mike Williams than DeAndre Hopkins than it does Mike Williams. So he's this guy who was less able to distance himself from his teammates than DeAndre Hopkins. But to be fair, who isn't? And he was also less efficient than Mike Williams. And so he makes a weird comp to almost all of the players in Clemson that we can see over the last few years. And he doesn't compare to Sammy Watkins either, who looked like a volume and efficiency player and really kind of tanked in terms of his NFL production. Now, what I was going to say about Tee Higgins, when I ran some similarity scores, two interesting names that came up for him. And again, these are early, that's why I don't have it in the database yet. I'm looking for a way that does it well, and so far it doesn't. But two names that came up when you're looking at his production score and his basic combine or basic physical metrics was Brandon Cooks, who is definitely not. Brandon Cooks, definitely an efficiency player, was incredibly more efficient of a wide receiver and more volume than Tee Higgins ever got. Also Odell Beckham, and he definitely profiles nothing like Odell Beckham, but it was interesting that both of those names came up as early drafted wide receivers, which Tee Higgins is meant to be, going into the NFL. So I kind of like that, but he doesn't come to either of them very well when you break his profile down overall. Now, the other interesting name that did come up is Devontae Parker. I have heard that comp for him in other places. I still don't like it. Based on his age-adjusted metrics, he doesn't distance himself from his team even as much as Devontae Parker did. And Devontae Parker's finally broken out now, so it's not entirely negative comp, but a slightly slower, yet big guy. I can understand why some people would go that way. The guy that came up that I really kind of like is Devin Funchess. I know, throw Rotten Tomatoes at your screen, but just remember it's your screen, okay? They can't actually hit me from here. I don't like the comp either, but the more I dig in, he's about 15 pounds lighter and slightly faster, which makes sense. About the same height, 6'4". His production scores look remarkably similar, and so do his efficiency scores. Now, Tee Higgins is slightly better across this efficiency metric, yards above team average, yards per team pass attempt. He didn't want the description, yet I said it anyway. That's what I do. And also in terms of his volume metrics, look a lot more like Devin Funchess, but slightly better. And frankly, Tee Higgins is playing, if you want to play competition level, in a slightly more competitive situation. I broke Higgins down, like I always do, a variety of different ways, including looking at his year of the year stats. This is everyone on Clemson over the last 3 years, ranked by market share of yards, only looking at the top 4 guys every year. An interesting name that I'm going to like profiling when he does decide to declare, Justin Ross here. He would have better age-adjusted production than Tee Higgins right now. So what I'm going to suggest is that Tee Higgins is getting pushed significantly by someone behind him. Not enough. I don't think this stuff should sort of adjust how much we expect from a player, because I go back to Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, who literally sucked up 75% of the LSU offense in their final season. Good players on the same team just blot out the sun. They don't blot out each other below the thresholds that we're talking about. It also goes back to Henry Ruggs a little bit. Either way, I think it's interesting to know that Justin Ross here is taking up a lot, especially last year, 20% of the market share of receptions, 19% of the market share of yards. It's really interesting. Also note that in this year, Tee Higgins is playing more as an efficiency player with a lower percentage of receiving yards than, receiving receptions than receiving yards, and yet he still looks like, again, it's a slightly confusing profile when you compare it to past wide receivers. But if you're looking at someone like Devin Funchess, it starts to make, I think it's a fairer comparison. A rich man's Devin Funchess, and you can do that with his physical metrics as well. When I really started to think about this Devin Funchess comp, one, recognize Devin Funchess has been a really good NFL player. Like, very few players can be that good in the NFL, so it's not a negative comparison at all. But where we're interested in fantasy, we know Devin Funchess never quite hit his ceiling that we wanted him to. Had a top 24 season, to be fair, but he got kind of profiled as this deep ball, big guy, go up and get a touchdown catcher. I've heard some people describe Tee Higgins as that, but where he's slightly smaller, 15 pounds lighter, and therefore slightly faster because of it, even by his pro day time adjusted up, because it was a pro day time, he's slightly faster than Devin Funchess. I think he might be a little more versatile than Devin Funchess. Now, there's a lot of nuance to Devin Funchess' game that we don't normally see, again, because the NFL kind of stigmatized him. Anyway, they stuffed him in one particular role, and they seem to keep doing that. But he has a lot more nuance to his game, again, just to be relevant, in terms of creating space, getting open, all those things, little things that wide receivers have to do quickly off the line or down the field. And a lot of that stuff I think is going to be in Tee Higgins' game as well. He's not going to create at the same space or all of that stuff, that the ancillary stuff that wide receivers have to do that we try to look for on tape with traits. He's going to have to do it in a way that Devin Funchess does it. He's going to have to do it in a way, frankly, that DeAndre Hopkins does it. But he's nowhere near the way as elite DeAndre Hopkins is at creating space, getting open, or catching the balls. DeAndre Hopkins is, based on the way he was able to produce in that in his situation over the last 3 years. He does compare well to Devin Funchess in terms of the amount of space he's able to create between him and his team, and through efficiency and also through volume. And so you're looking, I think, at a very rich man's Devin Funchess going into the NFL draft, potentially with high draft capital, and I think could have a much more versatile role in the NFL. None of that is bad. I'm just saying we can't say dominant wide receiver from Clemson and think DeAndre Hopkins. You have to think poor man, very poor man's DeAndre Hopkins, but that sounds mean, or very rich man's Devin Funchess, and I think that sounds positive. Again, Funchess didn't play for Clemson, but I really think we adjust too hard when we start we adjust at all, taking in different situations. Both played at significant enough levels that the market share doesn't need to be adjusted a lot. And if you want to see some of that in the conference tab here, you can see the average market share of yards for wide receiver 1s and 2s. And when you're talking the difference between the Big Ten or the ACC, where Devin Funchess, Tee Higgins was playing, mostly you're talking about the difference of a percentage for the wide receiver 1s in those conferences, and it doesn't adjust enough. Now, if you want to compare, someone playing in a non-CFB offense or in the American Conference, there's a significant difference. But someone like Devin Funchess to Tee Higgins at Clemson, it's actually a fairly reasonable comparison in terms of expectation of efficiency and expectation of volume. So yeah, that's my comp for him, and I really like him. I like him more than my initial model did. I think taking out that 1 year really helped that out. He got a 7.8 score, which is well within the range of projecting a top 24 season in my pre-combine model, in my pre-draft model, right there. This is a fairly deep class, as you can see from the number of 7s and 8s, which is very untypical for the pre-draft model. In any other year, if you go back and look, there are very rarely this many people scoring in that range. I've already done a video or two and written a few reviews on some of these other players I think should definitely easily be adjusted down just based on their conference level alone actually being significant, and so they're going to get tanked by the draft. Essentially, the draft will save me from having to worry about Gabriel Davis. Yeah. So Tee Higgins profiles us really well. He's top 3 in DLF's current rankings for wide receiver prospects right now, and I think that's fair. However, I do have a few more questions about him than someone like Mims. Edwards is probably going to get tanked by draft capital. So Mims is really the player I really want to dig into and understand a bit more. Right now I like him more, but as you can see by the fact his name's not bold yet, I haven't quite locked in how I think about Denzel Mims. Higgins, I fully dig in now. I really like his profile. It's a very good production profile. It's a very good efficiency profile. He looks to get good NFL draft capital. The first round has been mentioned. I don't think the NFL will care too much that he skipped the combine, since his pro day was fairly solid. But again, from his physical metrics and his production metrics, I think the type of role he can play in the NFL is more of a Devin Funchess plus than a DeAndre Hopkins minus. And that's a really high range of floor to ceiling. And that's, honestly, the more I look at this class, the more I see these really solid high expectation floors than I see ceiling. Now, before I get out of here, I just want to mention that just because you have a really good floor more than you have a ceiling doesn't mean the ceiling isn't there. I'm by far the last word on this stuff. I mean, lots of people like Higgins like a ton. Talking about plus Devontae Parker's or maybe Devontae Adams makes a fairer comparison of that. And he does, really, on his physical metrics. He's big, but not exceptionally fast, right? I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is exceptionally fast. But again, his production profile and efficiency scores don't really look like Tee Higgins, but that's an entirely another comparison that I wasn't prepared to do right now. Didn't mean to go there. So yeah, Richmond Devin Funchess, incredibly solid floor if draft capital and landing spot work out okay. And I'm really high on him. I think after the draft, like, a lot of these players have to be up there just because of the way they produced. I do have to make sure of Mims. I really want to lock in my idea of Mims. Maybe Higgins creeps over him. But right now, my preliminary glance of Mims has him over Higgins. So maybe I'll do Mims next. Actually, no. Someone's asked me to do a tight end or something next, but I will get to Mims. Have I said everything? Yeah, I think I have. Really like Mims. Third wide receiver for DLF. I don't disagree with it, but we're going to need some of this draft capital to fall his way that I can rank him there. Right now, I'd probably not get him in a rookie draft in the first round, and I'd feel sad about that. But by the time draft comes around, if everything comes to fruition, I think as the wide receiver 3 in this class, it wouldn't be terrible. Right now, I still prefer someone obviously like Judy, Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and one of my personal ceiling favorites, Jalen Reagor. If I'm shooting for ceiling, I prefer Reagor, but this floor for Higgins honestly looks incredibly good, and he definitely has some of that upside as well, where upside is a lot more harder to profile through production than floor, to be fair, and Higgins looks like he's got all the floor in the world. All right. Hope that was interesting. If it wasn't, I assume you stopped listening by now, to be honest. But thanks for checking it out. If you did, please leave a comment, like, review, hit me up on Twitter, or just go check out that database. Again, go to my Twitter timeline. First, my pinned tweet. It's a free database looking through all these stats, both the ones I've created and the raw stats and the market share for all the positions all the way back to 2003. So hopefully that'll be useful to you so you can come beat me in rookie drafts, because that's always fun. Appreciate it, guys, and I will talk to you again next time. Bye.
Do you have the time to